Tracy. So thank you so much for joining me in conversation with SA Harvest. As you know, you've been a huge influence on our thinking, and we really are privileged to have you, and just to give some insights into the current food situation in South Africa. Would you mind just introducing yourself, give a little bit about yourself, and then we can take it from there?
So I'm Tracy Ledger. I'm currently working as a senior researcher at the Public Affairs Research Institute, which is an institute that's affiliated with Wits University. I've got a rather varied academic background. I did undergraduate studies in economics and law and honours degree in economics. And then because I became more and more interested in food and development issues around food, I then did a master's degree in agricultural economics. And after that, I then did a PhD in anthropology, also investigating the decisions that people make around food. So I wouldn't call myself a full-time food researcher. I think food is more my hobby. Food research is my hobby, but it does link very much with the other work that I do, which is around poverty and inequality and access to sufficient food for families to be able to avoid the worst effects of malnutrition, which we all carry the cost of. So I think in a country like South Africa, it's very important for us to understand the absolutely central role of hunger and food insecurity in poverty and in the lives of poor households.
You know, Tracy, for us at SA Harvest, as you know, and for me in particular, I mean, there are two sides to it. One is the charity side, where we feed people who are hungry, and that's absolutely vital at the moment, but we know that that's not sustainable. It doesn't end hunger. And so the systemic side of things, how we can initiate things to actually end hunger eventually, is very important to us. So I want to start off, if you don't mind, by quoting something from your book, where you quoted a guy called Dan Crosley, who wrote in the Food Ethics Council. He wrote this: "I hope that we never live to see the day when the right to profit is pitted against the right to eat, although some might argue we are pretty close to that now. But if it ever comes, surely even the most hardened capitalist would agree that the latter must take precedent over the former." My question to you is, have we reached that point in South Africa?
Yes, I think we have. And the real problem is not so much that we've reached that point. I mean, obviously that is problematic. It's the fact that point remains largely invisible. So people don't see that there's a trade-off between the way in which our food marketing system works and the fact that households don't have enough to eat. They also don't see the linkages between that household inability to feed themselves sufficient quantities of nutritious food and broader socioeconomic ills that we all suffer the implications of. So there's very much a tendency to portray hunger as some kind of unfortunate individual thing that happens because people are poor and unemployed and don't have enough money to buy food, without understanding that there's in fact a huge societal implication of that. We all carry the cost of a significant healthcare burden that's related to child malnutrition. We all carry the cost of continued inequality because children can't learn in school. We all carry the cost of the fact that malnourished children are much more likely to grow up into violent adults, and so on and so on. But we don't see the parts of the system in a big picture and how they all relate together. And that's really important, because I've said it many times before, but I think it's absolutely critical, is that the way in which you understand the problem, in quotes, then very much limits what you see as the solution. So what we do very often is we don't think very much in a detailed, joined up way about what the problem is and what drives that problem. We just kind of have a look around and assume what the issues are, and then have some kind of supposed solutions for this that don't understand the real problem. So, you can't get the right answers if you don't ask the right questions. And asking the right questions starts with understanding the linkages and the problems. And when you've got a society where basically every single South African household accesses food through purchases, then it is the inability of people to afford food that is the direct reason for their hunger. And on the other hand, you have something that has then been commodified, which people can only access it if they have enough money to pay for it. And unfortunately, in South Africa, this is really what has happened, despite the fact that we're supposed to be a progressive democracy, despite the fact that we're supposed to be a society that aims for fundamental transformation to address poverty, address inequality, redress past injustices, increase people's standards of living, all of these things. Across basically every single sector, it's the mantras of cost recovery, competition, and profit that dominate people's ability to access all sorts of things. And it's, when I wrote the book, which was about 5 years ago, in the introduction, I said, imagine if we applied the same thinking that we do to water as we do to households' ability to access food. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where many households are actually in that situation in respect of water. If you can't find the money to pay for it, you can't have it. And this is just madness. And it undermines every single other rand that we spend on trying to increase standards of living, to reduce poverty, to reduce inequality, because of this idea that everything can be commodified and everything can be the basis of a market, so that it is ultimately the profit motive or the cost of something that determines whether or not people have access to the means of living.
Right. So, that is fascinating and for me really at the nub of the challenge.